And if we move this over a little bit, okay, let's restart and actually plug the turntable in because we're good at this. Where's the wire? There it is.
Plug the turntable in.
Why
what
would
do
we
you
do
do that for? Okay, Lance, what are we doing today?
I think we're going to talk about how to set up a turntable for the first time. So for you folks, when you go out and you buy a new turntable, well, there's a little bit of setup that needs to happen, and we're going to go through that. We are not going to go through how to put it all together and that sort of thing, but just some of the basics that you need to know.
And I think that we've been a little bit remiss when we've done some of these gear videos. We were on our own kind of, especially me last year, I was on my own kind of journey, if you will. And so as I would encounter gear and certain things, we would make videos about it. I think we needed to take a step back this year and really address some of the basics that we were remiss in addressing last year. So this is your basic setup of a turntable.
All right, great. So what we're going to start with is balancing the tone arm. So here's our cartridge. So this is the head shell, this is the cartridge, and the little guy right there where the needle is, that's your stylus. So when people talk about those things, those are the parts of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach it here, get it on there really tight. So what we want to do, this particular stylus needs about 1.5 grams of force pressing on the record to work correctly.
And this is an important point. Most cartridges are going to have a variation of tracking forces in order for them to be the most effective. Usually in a range of 1.25 on the very, very low end up to 2 or 3 grams.
Yeah.
I mean, never would be
3 grams is a little high, but you know, it just depends. So what you need to do is figure out what cartridge you have and just look it up. It'll usually come with some sort of documentation and I'll tell you what the tracking force is. So tracking force is the keyword you want to look for.
There you go.
Now to figure out how to do that, we have this weight, this counterweight on the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to balance this by hand. Now there are ways to do this more efficiently if you have a little scale, but most people aren't going to have those. So I'm going to show you how to do it by hand. So we want to get it into a spot. Let's turn it out a little bit so it's kind of going up. We want to be careful not to bump that stylus on anything. So you can see now how it's tilted up. What we want to do is turn it back to where it's just balanced on its own without leaning against anything. Ooh, almost got it. So right now it's just balanced. It's not touching anything.
So that's like a 0.
That's a 0. So what you want to do, there's this little dial on the end of most of these with numbers on it. So you want to turn it to where the 0 is facing up and on the little line right here. Right, so that's our starting point. So that's 0. So then what I want to do is turn this till I get to the 1.5 grams. So there's 0.5, there's 1, and then there's 1.5. So right now when this sits on the needle, this needle sits on the record, it's going to be putting 1.5 grams on that record.
So this, what he's just shown you now is how you balance a tone arm and put the proper tracking force on it without a scale. Now I will tell you that the scale is available on Amazon for about 11 or 12 bucks. Yeah. So if you're gonna be working with your turntable a lot, then I would recommend buying one. But that being said, this is a great way, and certainly how I started when I was balancing my tone arm when I first started. So.
And really, the only reason you would want to change this is if you pack this up and this got bumped or anything. Usually this is going to stay pretty fixed if you're taking good care of your turntable. But if you are in one of those who gets into trying out multiple cartridges, so this head shell is removable. And if you have a couple, say you have one that's a fancy mono one or ones that have different sounds, Well, every time you put it in there, you're going to have to readjust that weight so that way it corresponds with the cartridge that you're putting on there. Right? But for most people, you do it once and you're probably good.
So that's balancing the tone arm by hand without a scale. Great. All right. What else?
The next thing I want to talk about is aligning the cartridge. Now, for most people, if you buy a new turntable from the factory, like this is a Fluence RT85, they usually come pre-aligned. But if you ever change your cartridge off of the head shell, or if you just want to check, it's not a bad idea just to verify that it's aligned correctly from the factory. This is a good thing to know how to do. And what you need is this stylus protractor. And what you do, you can print these off of the internet. So you just look up, stylus protractor. This is the stupid protractors. It's pretty basic. So it just has these grids on here that you can use to align it. And what you do is you poke a hole here and you just set it on your platter like this. And what you want to do is very carefully set your needle on there, and you want to line that edge up so that way the edge of your cartridge is parallel with that cross line. Now you want to lift it up and do it here also. So what that means is it's going to be aligned in both spots. So as the needle travels through the record, it is aligned from the beginning of the record to the end of the record.
So it tracks properly and it finds the end of the record.
Right. So if this alignment is off a little bit, you might start hearing distortion in your records. You might get uneven groove wear over time in your records.
You may hear one side of your stereo being louder than the other because just that needle's rubbing a little bit harder on one side of the groove.
Yeah, right.
These are great. I do like that you can print out paper versions of them. There are a number of different protractors and there's a number of different schools of thoughts on which way is the proper way to align your cartridge. That being said, these ortophons can be a little tricky, but they're not impossible. And you can also invest in either brand specific protractors, or you can invest in plastic protractors that literally are like this, but it's a piece of like hardened plastic.
Yeah, and I have one of those because I work on a lot of turntables and I do this pretty often.
Yeah.
But for most people, the paper one is good. Now, to actually change the position of the cartridge, you would unscrew these and just so slightly, and then you can move it and turn it and then measure it again, and you kind of go back and forth. It could be an arduous process for sometimes if you don't get it aligned up just right.
Mm-hmm.
It might take a few minutes or whatever, and then you want to tighten them down, and after you tighten them down, go through it again and make sure it's still aligned.
One final thing, in order to check your alignment on these points, you're going to actually have to push the platter forward a little bit so that you can see that you can't just go straight across. It's not just going to go from one to one. You're going to have to move the platter forward just a little bit, but that's proper and in line with checking it. But I don't think anybody told me that when I first started trying this. I was like, is it supposed to go straight across or what? No, you move the platter forward, and as long as the points reach the same points, then you are aligned.
Yep. Great. Now, I didn't loosen these screws just because I know this cartridge is already aligned and I didn't want to mess it up.
Sure.
But that's just how you do that.
Cool.
The next thing we want to do is we want to check the speed and make sure this platter is spinning at the right speed.
And we should also mention there's a number of different types of turntables that you can get. This is obviously a pretty nice modern turntable, but it's not ridiculous. You can get into this turntable for around
$500.
$500, brand new.
It's beautiful. It's a great value.
It's a nice platter. It's belt driven. It's gonna get rid of a lot of the issues that come with some of the older turntables that you might encounter because it's brand new.
And Fluence has this is the top of the line version. They have
the 81
and the 84 and the 83, and it's just various differences, but it's the base is mostly the same.
It's a beautiful table if you are looking for something like that.
Yeah.
But to be said, this is a belt-driven table, so you're going to have that as a consideration.
Yeah. Over a number of years, this belt, so you can see the belt is driven by this motor and goes all around the platter. Some of them have smaller belts that go around a spindle in the middle. It's just the design of this table, and it works great. If you run this for pretty steadily for a couple of years, this belt might start getting loose and stretching out or something, and your speed might vary, right?
Yeah.
So how do we check the speed?
Well, there's an app for that.
So we set the RPM app to 0, and we're going to start it up by moving this off the cradle, and it will eventually settle in 35, 34, 33.42.
Now by the app. It's interesting to me that sort of starts high and then sort of kind of comes into the right speed. That's interesting.
Right. So it had us at 33 1/3 plus 0.26%, which is pretty accurate.
You're not going to be able to hear that. You're not going to be able to hear. Oh, that's a little fast.
Yeah.
How fast? 0.0.
So this reflects the wow and flutter specification on your turntable. You'll see that in the specs for this. You want to get as close to that 33 1/3 as you can. This one's pretty close.
You do have a lot of vintage turntables, especially some of the nicer vintage turntables that have a built-in strobe. That is exactly what you're doing with that, and it's just about looking and lining up that strobe, and hopefully we'll give you a little video example. If not, I'll just cut this fucking phrase out. So whatever. I don't know.
The last thing you need to do is
Go ahead.
The last thing you want to do is set your anti-skate. What is anti-skate, sir?
So anti-skate is the sort of pressure pushing the needle one way or the other. When a tone arm is not properly balanced, and it can actually skate across the record. It's the worst thing in the world. To see a needle just go skating across your record, boy, it's not a happy day. So especially if it's a nice record. So the anti-skate just kind of gets that any sort of undue pressure or pushes that needle a little further into the groove.
Yeah, so the arm, when it's on the record, it has a tendency to force this way toward the spindle. And what we want to do is we have a small force pulling it back this way. So that needle will just sit right in the middle of that groove instead of leaning against one side of it.
And sometimes that anti-skate on the old Pioneers, the PL 35s and ups, they were just literally a little ball bearing attached with a piece of fishing line.
Yeah.
Pulling
even
back.
some of the modern turntables have that.
They still do
too.
that.
So on this one, it has an anti-skate dial.
Oh, let's see that.
And really what you do is it's set at 0. You want to put it to what your tracking force is. So this one's 1.5. So we'll set it to 1.5, and that's really all you have to do. If you know the tracking force, you can set the anti-skate. Super easy.
Wow. I think I learned something today too. Awesome. Well, hey guys, we just wanted to give you the quick and easy basics on how to set up a turntable and what it would what you have to go through to make sure that you're setting these things up properly. You're not damaging your records. You're not putting undue pressure on the deck or on the records that you're playing. It's just we just wanted to be pretty clear about how to do this. And I think that this is something that if you want to play records, you should kind of know how to do this sort of thing.
Yeah. So if you follow these steps, your needle's going to last a long time. You're not going to ruin your records, and it's going to sound great.
And again, one of the great indicators or the easiest indicators that something's wrong is if it doesn't sound right. So if you're listening to it and there's some rub or just there's something that's not
distortion
right,
or whatever,
then there's a good chance that something in this process that we've described here has not been done properly. So you need to go back, check your alignment, check your tracking force, and make sure that you are at the spec.
Yep.
At the spec. So thanks for joining us. We are the Vinyl Herd. Please like and subscribe to our videos. It helps us as we move along in this journey. And again, we have really are going to try to do some more consistent content for you guys this year, at least putting a video out once every couple of weeks. Oh God, I said it online.
We gotta do it now.
But no, we're trying to be consistent with you guys and continue down this path of learning and having fun with vinyl records. So until next time, guys.
All right, bye.